States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'll start public comment on agenda items. There's any. Hearing none. With our consensus items, line item number 1, minutes from the August 13th regular board meeting and executive board meeting session, we need to table that and approve it next month because we did not have a quorum to sign what was here that night. Right, it had to be in attendance.
That makes sense. Got to have a quorum of the board, and they have to be people who have makes sense. Thank you.
So that will be brought up at next month's meeting then. Additional information on the consensus items?
I don't really have too much. I did just want to note that you have something in there about a field trip to Ohio from the FFA, and I just wanted to say in particular to welcome Kelly Arnett on board as our new Ag and FFA teacher. I'm glad to see them getting active and out already, and hearing good things about that. I'm excited for them for their outing.
Do we have any questions, comments, concerns on the consensus items as presented?
I'll make a motion to approve all of the items as presented, except for the
Motion on the table by Eric. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Motion on the table by Eric, second by Tim. All those in favor, announce by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Hearing none, vote stand 6-0. On to line item D. We do not have a program update tonight. Line item E, old business to address.
Not tonight.
Okay. F, line item number 1, the public hearing for preliminary determination of projects.
So this is the first step in our request to secure a general obligation bond. Basically, before a school corporation can enter into a lease or issue a bond, there has to be an opportunity for the public and the board to hear about why we're doing this and what we might want to do it for, and for the public to offer any public comment they may wish to. This is the first hearing, and it is open for public comment. Later in this process, Michelle, as acting officiator of this meeting, will ask for public comment after we have an opportunity to hear more about the process and what we're doing this for and how it will impact our financial situation.
Those are current school board meeting, and open it up to the first public hearing on the preliminary determination of the GO bond.
So North Adams is considering a general obligation bond to further manage our debt service tax rate. And again, just as education for the public who may be listening, a reminder, we did find in Adams County that this particular taxing unit's assessed value did go up by 8.5% when we were notified here a few weeks ago, which was a little surprising for all schools in Indiana. I think all but 2 or 3 had fairly significant rises in ADAM. What happens when assessed value rises is your tax rate decreases, and the problem or the particular situation we would be in a local taxing entity, for us, we would have lost 2 cents on the dollar because of that decrease in tax rate. Now, while that might not sound like a problem when we know that, again, schools operate on a fairly tight budget, and that's what we use for a lot of our bonding now to do a lot of capital projects and our maintenance and renovations. That's money that we don't really want to lose. And to make sure that the public understands, even if we would not want to take out this bond to secure and keep our tax rate stagnant, we're not asking for any raise, we're just going to keep it neutral. Another local taxing entity would then give that money. So if we choose not to take it, it doesn't lower anyone's tax rate in the community. It would go to the library or the city or the county or another taxing entity. here in our local community.
For the purpose of this meeting, state law IC 6-1.1-20 requires that before a school corporation issues bonds for the construction or renovation of school buildings resulting in total costs more than certain thresholds, it must hold 2 public hearings. This is our first hearing for the board to hear more about this proposed project and for the public to ask questions or provide input at the end of the presentation.
Scott, would you like to go over just our public comment guidelines?
Sure. Anyone wishing to speak must be recognized by the president, or in this case Michelle, will be asked before asking questions, making comment, provide their name and group affiliation. Speakers may be limited in time by the board or president and may not speak more than once on the same topic until all other speakers have been heard. The president may also interrupt, warn, or stop a speaker who is being irrelevant, harassing, disruptive, obscene, or personally attacking an individual. If a speaker becomes sufficiently unruly or inappropriate, the president may ask for removal of the individual, and all statements shall be directed to the president only.
So again, with this GO bond, we are going to be asking for 1.1 million, and that again is to keep our tax rate neutral, no increase, no decrease. Because this came on relatively suddenly, we had a very large roofing project that was already budgeted for in our operations fund. This is a large segment and much higher in cost than our other roofing that we've been doing every year. This is going to be the main part of the middle school, the old middle school part of the building. So it was going to cost between $700,000 and $900,000 just for that segment to have that roof done. So this was going to be a good fit, again, for something that we needed, that we already had quotes on, specs on, things like that. So that's going to take some pressure off the operations fund and allow us to do a few more things for it that we weren't thinking we were going to be able to budget. There also will be a little bit extra that we're hoping to be able to do some other site improvements. Again, one of the things I hope to do in the spring is to start working on our ADA ramping and stairs for the front of the football stadium. If you haven't been there in a while, they're wood and they are deteriorating and it needs to be replaced, and honestly needs to be something that's better and more accessible for our mobility impaired public and gives better, I think, just flow to that entire area. So we hope through this GO bond to be able to pay for the concrete pad that AD compliant platform would sit upon. And so those are the 2 site improvement projects that we'd be asking for in this bond. As far as, again, costs and things like that, again, the roofing project element is about $700,000 to $900,000, and the concrete pad is going to be probably right at or just over $100,000, which would give us ample room with soft costs and some contingency money for 1.1 to cover.
So to further explain the financial impact of the project, Jim Elizondo, I was going to say, Luke, not.
And that's my fault. I knew you and your partner were splitting tonight, and I picked the wrong one.
A lot of board meetings going on early in the week.
If we can just make sure that that's corrected in our.
Do you have the slide for that, or just?
Yep.
Yeah, just put it up.
Give me
And
just
we
a
have
second.
copies at your table.
Thank you, it's nice to see everyone. So basically, as Kim has outlined, I'm here to present our ideas on how you would finance that, and what that would look like, and how we could stay within the existing debt service rate. And part of that is due to the assessed value growth, what we had projected to be fairly level tax rate. With that growth, we will see a notch down, and the idea is to try to keep within that, and then free up some room in the operations fund. Everybody around the state's operations fund are continuing to get pressured, and anything schools can do to move that and still stay within a manageable tax rate, in this case, within the existing rate, we'll see it happening a lot. So if we go to the next slide, it's just want to start with just a quick summary of the outstanding debt service obligations. The blue and green are the 2 bond issues we did for the high school and middle school. That was the large piece. that we split over a year end. The light blue and the tan are the last two. One is a GO and one was a lease bond, but still for school-wide type operation fund projects. Similar to this, tonight we're talking about doing another general obligation bond, but simply it's just which vehicle fits best right now to take care of providing that opportunity. If we go to the next slide, I convert those into your actual tax rates. So those payments are now included in whatever color that was chosen to be. I'm not sure where that is. None of your school colors are anywhere close to that. But this looks at the tax rate from 23, 24, and then you see in 25 where we see that estimated 2-cent decrease. Now that we have your assessed value, that's a very close number. It's possible that AD can change just slightly, but we know by the time we get to your 1782 notice, we will be able to dial that down into 4 decimal points and keep it right where you are at that level. And then you see the natural drop that we were expecting in 26 to leave flexibility for future flexibility for other needs. We go to the next slide. We would propose that you could do that says $1 million up there. We're looking at a $1.2 million bond issue as a maximum, with about $100,000 of conservative cost of issuances, leaving you about $1.1 million for project costs. To the extent, and as you remember when we've done these other projects, we try to be very conservative here, because at your next hearing, you'll have to consider maximum not to exceed items, and so we're trying to show all those right now. At the point we sell bonds, when and if you decide to proceed, anything that we pare out of that cost of issuance would either go towards additional funds or reduce the size of the bond issue. But again, that correction of it should be 1.2. We propose that you can pay this off in 5 years using the payments in 2026, so your 2025 budget would include those payments, keeping the debt service tax rate with no increase, and then using about 4 years to pay that off fairly quickly, rejuvenate your general obligation capacity on a reasonable basis, but still leave plenty of flexibility for other needs as soon as next year. If we go to the next slide, here's an example right there of some of the, if we had another $2.5 million roughly, what that might look like. It's just showing you that some of the things we've talked about could easily fit in that range and still provide flexibility into the future. So you're in a debt position that does offer you you and future boards, a lot of opportunities to lift things. And the next slide, again, stacking on another idea, another $4.5 million. Next slide. And then, another $8 million. So there's a lot of capacity in there. And then you still see that by 2033, assuming no growth through your assessed value, which is our assumption out in those years, you still have another window where there's room. Now, if the AV grows greater than our conservative estimates, that creates a natural space in there, but trying to be conservative. This is just to show you there is a lot of capacity to look at other needs down the road. Next slide. Oh, this is not the slide I was thinking of. Let's try another. Okay. I'm going to...
You may have.
Okay, I'm going to also share with you, and it's not on the board here, but I will highlight what's on there. As part of the process for the bonding, we do have to set maximums, and there are some things that legislature require us to disclose. So what I have, and the board has, we have an estimated cost of issuances and the project budget. I highlighted that earlier. $1.2 million estimated project, our budget, with $100,000 of cost of issuance, leaving us $1.1 million project funds. So that's a summary of what we think the budget would look like as a maximum of $1.2 million borrowing. We have to declare what we've used as an interest rate assumption. So we've used between 2 and 6%. Today we sold an issue of 5 years, similar size bond issue. It came in at just over 3.1%. So still being very conservative in our number. We do have to lay out the maximum term. I showed that repayment. We are advertising 8 years as the maximum, just to allow flexibility. If something were to change, we could stretch that out a little bit to give you more room. I don't think we need that at all. But again, bond counsel likes us to be very conservative, so we're showing in the advertising up to 8 years. When we sell bonds, we will pare it down to exactly what's there, and that 8 years is irrelevant, but we have to keep that in case there's something that happens and we have to have some flexibility. We have to estimate the total interest costs. That's assuming that 2 to 6% range. We're showing about $200,000 in interest over the life of the issue. Again, when we sell bonds, if it were to come in at 3%, we would pare that interest number down to exactly what's needed, and that then is irrelevant because that cap has then been reduced. Maximum annual payments of $600,000. That's the payment that could be used in any of the individual years. So the highest year you see in that graph would be where that's reflected. It doesn't mean that you have to be there all the years. It's just that is the maximum, and that becomes one that we cannot exceed no matter what. So if we were to try to shorten it to 2 years, we would have a problem fitting within that $600,000. Maximum tax impact, and again, that would be at that $600,000 in any given year, is about just under 7 cents per $100 of assessed value. That's this issue standalone. But as we look at your total debt service, we show in that last line that we show a 0 increase because we believe all of this will fit, and and I think the board, if they decide to proceed, will determine that it will fit within the existing debt service rate with no increase. And finally, there are 2 ratios that I don't find real relevant to the taxpaying community because you have to dig a lot deeper to compare school to school, but they are ratios that the investing world does look at. The first one is the school corporation's maximum annual payments per assessed value. So we take a look at your total payments, including the estimates for this project, which is that $600,000 each year, because we look at worst case there, and we divide that by your assessed value. That comes out just under 0.5%. That is a very low ratio. Nationwide, it's very low. In Indiana, it's just above very low. Just because Indiana fits very low across the board. But again, not a ratio that any investor would be concerned about that is going to invest in your bonds. And finally, the last ratio is called the direct and overlapping debt. So we take your debt, outstanding debt, and we take all of the outstanding debt of any taxing district that's in your tax bill. So county, township, fire, library, etc. We take all of their outstanding debt, add it to yours, and this is trying to find a ratio of the debt burden on your taxing body, and that comes in at a little over 6%, 6.18%. That is not crazy low, but it's well below average. So it's, it's a moderate, but not anywhere, again, that any investor is going to have any concern about. And so that's all I have tonight. It's at the next hearing, we'll have the exact same material. At that point, if you have patrons that want to hear that, we will repeat as much as you want. To the extent you have patrons that haven't heard or have heard it and don't want to hear it, you can have it summarized or move right on to considering testimony, etc. So, any questions for me?
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.
Thank you.
At this point, after hearing the explanation, the hearing is open to public comment. Hearing none, we will close this meeting out and reconvene our regular school board meeting. Yeah. Alright. So line item, let me see here. That would be number 3 now. We're on to the approval of the adjunct teacher permit, oh, okay. Okay, another public hearing for the 2025 budget. Almost skipped over you, Kim. Okay, all right, we'll suspend and
So this is a similar process without as many speakers. Beth and I have been working on the 2025 budget, and she did submit it to the state. We received our Form 9 back, which was shared with you in the financial packet. And this is the public's opportunity if they have any comment on the 25 budget. Beth, do you have any comments? I mean, you work on this a lot, so.
It's really not any much different than previous years. It helps with the geo bond, we can move the roofing project to that, so that frees up a little, so we can do a few more capital projects, other than that.
Our education fund pretty much stayed where we predicted it with having some key retirements and things like that. Working with Chad Blacklock, our financial consultant, he was really happy with that. We did have to cut what we initially were looking at for operations funds, so this being able to move the roofing project is really helpful in having to decrease that budget. And just so folks know, typically in operations, there are a few personnel things in there. A lot of it is capital projects. We've been trying to stay at about $1 million for capital projects, which sounds like a lot, but it doesn't really go very far today when you're trying to do much. So this roofing project was pretty much our entire 25 budget for capital projects. So this is going to be, we're not going to really have the $700,000 because again, we had to cut some of our, what we asked for, but he will have, Scott Miller will have a couple $100,000 to do some other improvements that we needed to do through the operations fund. So other than that, there wasn't anything that was a big surprise, which is good.
we'll take that. Hearing no comment, we will close that meeting and reconvene our regular board meeting. Now, on to line item number 3, approval of adjunct teacher permit employment agreement.
So you had approved our adjunct teacher policy a couple board meetings ago. And at the time, I was working on it and thinking on it because we had some folks that were moving from para positions into some teaching positions. And then I found out you can't use adjunct teacher permits for special ed teachers to help them get licensed. But there was another person who is well into completing their degree in teaching and is actually functioning as a teacher presently, doing everything a teacher does, from preparing, grading, planning, prepping, everything with kids, discipline, everything that you could do in a classroom setting like a teacher does. So this is a way to help provide some relief because it allows us to pay her as a first-year teacher, but it also gives some benefits such as leave time. Previously, we would have paid these folks as long-term subs, which is fine. The pay isn't really that great for someone who's doing all the jobs full-time as a licensed teacher, and it doesn't give any leave time, so that if they would need to have a doctor's appointment, have a sick child, whatever, they just aren't paid. So this is, again, I think a benefit for somebody who's doing the job of a teacher, is making a commitment to be here, probably before the end of the year is going to have the degree and license. So this is just to provide a bridge, basically, for that person. And again, I don't feel like we're not using this to try to work around because by state law, adjunct teachers can't be part of the bargaining unit. We're still following those guidelines because we're choosing to. But I think it is again, a nice step in recruitment and retention for somebody who's been a loyal person for our district and is intended to stay and continue to be a long-term employee.
I think it's a perfect scenario right now, and I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second that.
I have a motion on the table by Jill, seconded by Tim. All those those in favor announce by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition?
I abstain from this vote, so.
Yeah. The abstention comes about as it is Jenny Hill, so we have 5 in favor of, 0 opposition, and 1 abstention to that vote. To number 4 then, approval of the classified rate schedule.
Well, I think I'm trying to have this come before you every month. Again, trying to get the classified raise done before collective bargaining this year, just to try to see how that would help with workflow later in the semester, and then there's always some things that we're trying to work out. So we did have some changes at the high school, especially with not replacing a secretary, and so that has led me to have to kind of monitor that situation, and the workload is pretty big on the 2 who are remaining, and so I felt that we needed to do some things to recognize that. It has been fairly, I won't say daunting because they've done it and are doing it really well, but it's not just a small extra amount of work, and so I wanted to make sure that they were getting fairly compensated, because again, it was a cost savings to the district. We're still saving money from not replacing that position. It's just, again, recognizing a really large task that they're taking on in addition to what they had already been assigned.
So with that, if the need should arise, that position could be reopened or reposted.
That position could be reopened, and they understand that if we do have to add that position back, their pay would go down to be reflective of what I had been previously.
But the workload would also go down
Yes.
as well, so.
Yes.
Do I have any question, comment, or concern on the approval of the classified rate schedule as presented? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make that motion.
A motion on the table by Tim. Do I have a second? A motion on the table by Tim, seconded by Dave. All those in favor announce by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition, same sign. Okay, with hearing none, I'll let that stand 6-0. To our superintendent's report.
So we have a month under our belt, believe it or not, and I can believe how quickly everything is moving again and still. So tomorrow is our first waiver flex day on September 11th. So again, for the folks listening at home, no school for students, teachers have professional development, and we have a lot of things happening for different staff. There's a lot of work on curriculum, there's a lot of work on instruction. We're having some special training with our new paras on crisis prevention and de-escalation. Same thing with, we're reviewing that with our bus drivers tomorrow. Going to do some just general meeting with our paras. Lots of times they don't get the time and attention when they're first hired on, and trying to make sure there's not questions they have or needs they have. Let's see, what else? Safety. So one thing I want to make the public aware of, and you folks too, and you'll be getting more information about this from our district newsletter, but also there'll be a school messenger going out. In the first 90 days of school, we are required to have now they call it an armed intruder drill. And they did pass some legislative this last session that specified some additional things we have to do with that. We have created more with a new SRO an in-house safety committee to try to help him kind of understand processes and things, but also giving him a little bit more responsibility. And he is working a tag team with me on our first armed intruder drill, which will be happening within the next month. So one of the things that has to happen is that we have to give the public notification, parents notification when this is going to happen. So that's different from most years. We might have told you after the fact what we did or how it happened. Now we have to give notification up front. We have to make accommodations for students who may have diagnosed sensory issues, mental health issues, PTSD, things that might be triggered from a drill that might include a lot of overload or overstimulation or bring back memories. We have to do some things with aftercare prepare. And so this summer, some of our guidance staff and social worker went and were trained on a program called Prepare, which is the recovery aspect of crisis. Bless you. And they're preparing just some things to do in the classroom after the drill and exercises, just to debrief with students and to talk about what to do if you are struggling emotionally with a situation that you might encounter. We found last year, I think this is a great idea, even though the bomb threat, quote unquote, by the end of it, I think everyone knew there really wasn't a threat. You don't really know what is really going through someone's head. For example, my own son, who was 5 at the time, he was okay. I thought, we talked about it. A month later, he calls me into his room and says, "Mom, would you ever not come get me if something bad happened?" And so you never know how they really have or have not processed something. So this is just, again, making sure that you're not leaving that up to question marks and giving them the opportunity and the tools and the knowledge of what to do if they're still struggling or have questions. And then there are those students that we have to provide an alternative activity for if it's not a drill that is suitable for them. In talking with Andy, he and I have met a couple times. We are going to do some type of educational piece with the students first, talking about ALICE, which is our strategy that we use, the run, hide, counter. And it's going to be differentiated. Pre-K to 3 will get a different lesson than 4 to 8, than 9 to 12. Depending upon their developmental needs at that point. So we'll go through it with them just on, what if, and use appropriate language and scenarios and responses. And then we'll have a simulation probably within the next week after those educational opportunities, where it'll be more of a walkthrough or tabletop type thing, where they have to practice a hard lockdown, practice at what point would you try to leave a scenario, when is it best to run, not opening a door, if someone comes and knocks, things like that. I hate to say that with the recent school shooting again that happened in Georgia, we've had opportunity to talk about some things, and so I have emphasized to school staff here after that the importance of having your doors closed and locked during instructional times. That saved the life of several folks in that initial room that individual came back to because the door was closed. The student went up to try to let him in on the teacher's direction, but then noticed he was pulling something from his book bag, backed away. That saved that classroom of students. So that is something that Andy's been going around and checking doors even before this and closing them if he finds them open, but it's something I've just reiterated to staff. Statistically, most people aiming to do harm with a weapon in a school cannot or do not choose to use the time to try to break into a closed locked door.
It's very intentional.
Yeah. So they are wanting an easy target, so don't make the target easy. And we've also talked about the student had been released from class to go to the restroom. Good thing. Again, kudos to the high school for going to a no backpack policy. I assume this school had a no backpack policy. He had to leave the room to go get his bag, which housed his weapon. Again, no backpacks in the classroom makes it not impossible, but certainly less possible to bring something into a room. And then just trying to make sure that instruction is important. Students don't need to be leaving unless it's important that we do. And so things like bathroom, locker, water fountain are things we want to discourage because there's no adult on the opposite end receiving them and interacting with them. Doesn't mean it can't ever happen. We all have emergencies, but just try to be mindful that staying in the classroom under supervision is, from a safety perspective, a better situation. Let's see, collective bargaining starts soon. We had our public meeting just before this board meeting. We did not have any public attend who wanted to give comments, so I don't have really anything to report to you, but we did complete that legislative requirement. September 24th and 26th right now are our scheduled bargaining meetings. I'm hoping we come to consensus and move to ratification soon after that. Enrollment is something we're checking most days. October 1st, remember the state legislature last year moved that to the first day, school day in October, which is October 1st this year. So we're about 3 weeks away, a little less than 3 weeks away Facilities update, our multipurpose room is moving right along. We're still thinking that it will be ready to turn over by the end of December, which is when we wanted it to be. Right now, that's most of what is going on, and just trying to keep up with mowing and things like that, with being so dry. That helped. What's not dead, right? That's what my home yard is. And I wanted to reiterate, we are always looking for substitutes and bus drivers. We have a full crew of bus drivers presently, but we really have very few subs. And so that is as you want to do it, and it's $87 a day for when you want to do that. And we still have quite a few bus drivers in our county routes, especially who are nearing retirement. So again, this is kind of a job that you can pick your hours to a certain degree depending on the route that's available, and I think have gotten our routes to a very competitive wage. Again, some of our drivers are making over $40,000 a year, depending upon how long you want to drive in a day, and some of it can be a full-time job to a part-time job. So I certainly encourage anyone to investigate it. A lot of folks, I think, are intimidated by the idea of driving a bus, and I can tell you a lot of our recent drivers, teacher drivers who have come on board have said it's not nearly as cumbersome or overwhelming as I thought it would be. Some of them even said, I kind of enjoy it because you can kind of just focus on that and empty your mind. And then we help you too. So we provide training and trainers. We provide the bus to practice on. We provide someone to ride with you for your training hours, and we will reimburse you for your tests and your physicals and things like that if you become a driver for us. So again, it can be kind of besides your time, a no investment on the front end too much. And that's about all I have today.
I would say, kind of back just real quick with this whole safety thing. I think if we can, even as adults and with our kids, whether they're grandkids, our own friends, family, whomever they may be, just help and teach that if you see something, don't be afraid to say something. Because I think so often everybody's like, well, if it's not the real thing, I don't want somebody to be mad at me. You know, at the end of the day, I'd rather have somebody upset with me for 5 seconds as opposed to be mourning somebody's death.
Absolutely. It is our job and law enforcement's job to figure out if something is true, untrue, credible, not credible. So just report anything you do hear or see, and
So the metal detector, is that?
have stopped this. If they have. This is a smaller rural school in Georgia, so I assume they don't have anything like that. Mostly metropolitan schools have the metal detectors everyone has to walk through. Certainly if they'd had a reason to want him. New information emerging is that the mother had heard something from her son. I think he sent a text message right before, and she did notify a counselor. School staff did go look for him. He had already left the room. They couldn't find him. They went to, I don't know what they were doing. I assume they went to look elsewhere, or there was some confusion about who the student really was. In the meantime, from when they arrived at the room, he wasn't there. He came back. So I don't think at this point there was negligence on the school's part, but that was something we reviewed too.
Negligence, I just mean as in proactive. Because one of the things that when they were interviewing, somebody said, you don't think of it happening in a small town, but basically it always occurs.
It can happen anywhere.
Yeah.
And maybe that's something we should
You know, I think we had talked in the past about either the wands or even the walkthrough units, but then we looked at some additional questions or concerns about the legal perspective, the behind the scenes, what do you do if, and at what point, you know.
I knew we had talked about it, but I wasn't sure if it was there was more of a handful or whether it was.
We do have handheld wands. Every building does have handheld wands because the state did give those as options to every school. So every building has handheld wands, but you have to have a reason to want to use them.
Right. Where if there was a walkthrough, if it was all possible, I mean, maybe it's not because of legality, but if that was to change as this is moving on, as, every politician is talking or everybody is talking about the school safety aspect, if it became where it was easy to do, maybe something like this.
It could very well come down depending on how things go, and I could see, and I, maybe not at some point in time, that's something that they may mandate into policy. Maybe they're in
Yeah.
practice.
We can't get things moving a different direction on school violence potentially.
Could you
It's
come
sad
up-
because this kid was really, he had a rough life. He'd had a lot of trauma. He'd endured abuse and witnessed abuse, and so he checked a lot of boxes. I think
But maybe if they had something like that, they could have saved him from doing that and gotten him out there.
Could you update me real quick on, okay, we had this discussion, I remember having the discussion about the legalities, was that the reason we decided not to, and what, I don't, could you update me on the legalities, why we would not want to have
a walkthrough.
a walkthrough because of the legalities? I thought it was more logistics and everything else, but.
I don't think that was in mind.
That was before.
Was that before
That was
Kim?
before Kim, and I
Okay.
know a
Okay.
lot of what we talked about is from a perspective of, you know, a lot of people at that time, because it wasn't as prevalent or prominent. So the what ifs, if we, you know, the detaining somebody and, we had.
I want to do this, it's gonna take a lot more than just a vote to say, hey, let's start putting our name.
I know.
Some
Yeah.
very extensive policies because your privacy rights are gonna be affected.
Mm-hmm.
You're gonna have to determine that there's an actual problem in our community that we need to address through this mechanism. So it's way more complex than
Right.
just a law or a machine.
Right, right.
And the logistics is another
Well,
matter.
yeah. I just remember there was a logistic, but then the what ifs, if they trigger it, what do we do? And there was some,
That's
it's
why
been a
that's
while, and
the
that's why
discussion.
I needed refreshing on it. Thank you for that. I appreciate that.
Some things are, we have multiple doors that students enter in, and it's not, we have closed that and reduced that quite a bit, but just thinking that our buses are on one side of the building, and students enter, middle school and elementary enter into one door different than where high school enters, and then you have car drop off, you have walkers, so there's at least 5 doors that we have to have some sort of. Again, we might be able to still reduce that further. It would be pretty, I think 4 is probably as much as we could.
Thank you.
These things make you think it's worth it no matter what, for sure.
Right.
That's what I was like, oh my, if they had something like that, they'd call it somewhere.
Yeah.
Maybe
There's
not.
Yeah, there's so many what ifs when you start
Well,
asking.
wouldn't for sure, but maybe you could.
Yeah.
Well, I can tell you, one of the law enforcement officers, Officer Elwell, was telling me that the rifle he had was an AR-15 style rifle, but it fit in a relatively small backpack. It was not an atypical, it wasn't like a bug out sack, it wasn't like a rucksack or whatever, it was just a regular old, typical size, because it was folded. So it doesn't take much to smuggle something anywhere. Because it's not just school now, you have to worry about it
Right.
anywhere. But it was a good exercise for our staff and our kids to talk about some things and to be more aware. And again, like Michelle said, the big thing is be aware of your surroundings. Just like I told them, you told that girl who initially went to open the door for a classroom that he was trying to get into when he returned, if she hadn't been looking through the window, because most of us just walk up, open it, turn, and we're turned around before they even come in, he would have been in there and they would have been ducks in a barrel, pretty much. And 2 SROs did intervene almost immediately with him, and he surrendered, but 9 people had been injured and 4 killed within, I think they said 3 minutes. So
Everything starts and ends so fast.
it does.
Other matters to come before the board, by the board?
Just a couple ISBA issues. Indiana School Board Association, the fall conference is here in October 23rd, 24th. If you've not been to an ISBA conference, or if you've been to one, I would highly recommend that. We've got some great stuff on the agenda for this. It's very much worth your time. So you can sign up, you can walk in the day of the show and attend. But definitely would recommend attending the ISBA conference here in October. We met with Katie Jenner last week, Dr. Katie Jenner with the State School Board. And she's, the things you're going to be seeing, of course, is still the press for reading. That'll be a discussion that will be ongoing. A child needs to be able to read by third grade, or at least at a certain level by third grade. Thank goodness we are already assessing our students in second grade, and kudos to our staff and administration for doing that. That's been a great assist for our kids, so thank you for that. But you're going to continue to hear conversations on reading, and then you're also going to hear conversations here on the change of graduation requirements. You'll be seeing that. I think she did a nice job of presenting it. I can see the logic behind it. I don't think it's going to be, and tell me if I'm wrong, I don't think it's going to be overly cumbersome compared to what we've done, but it is a change, so it is going to be cumbersome.
Tracking it will be cumbersome.
Yeah. It's so I think you're going to see a lot of discussion, especially during the session, on some of the changes on that. So
is it true that, some of what they've changed, that you have to be careful, or some of the colleges that can do in review, they will not admit the requirement? Is that true?
Well, I think I know, they amended the high school redesign proposal tremendously based upon the feedback, because a lot of the universities came together and issued a letter of disagreement, basically, with the state board and the State
So that
Department.
hasn't been too long ago.
No, they did revise it.
last couple of months, significantly revised. Yeah.
So it is much more, I think, doable, if that's how I want to say it. There's still some elements that I think are going to be a little interesting, but it's not nearly going to be the level of fluidity I think they were looking at previously. And we had also been concerned about rigor for all kids, but especially the college-bound kids. I think could have potentially left high school thinking they had a college-ready degree, and I'm not sure they would have been ready for college because they wouldn't have had the exposure they
That's
needed.
what I think.
Yeah, I think that the military was also something very interesting. 77% of high school students that wanted to go into the military in the state of Indiana, I think it was the state of Indiana, it might have been national. That might be a national stat. 77% of recruits that go into the military are unable to qualify. And a lot of that, and one of the discussions that Katie had with the National Guard director for the state of Indiana was, what do we need to do to make sure students understand what is required in order to get into the military? So if they decide, they decide their freshman year, or whatever it is, that is their trek, we need to make sure that we're serving them properly. Yeah, and apparently there was some, and this is not just the state of Indiana, but there were some issues with that. So that's one of the additional things that they changed here in the last couple of months to make sure that those students are getting the instruction necessary. Probably, or that education is not the right term, but being told what is the requirements so they can meet those requirements.
I'm sure not all of that, as we tried to tell kids, it's not all about academics either. Some of it is if you have certain things on your record, if you have certain labels, if you take certain medications, it may be.
See, and that's why I was
optional.
asking, is it just education or is it a whole bunch
I
of?
don't think so, but I'm sure some of it's education that kids are using it as I'll just go into the military. No, it's not just the military. They have standards.
Yeah, it's that, it's leadership issues. I mean, it's more than just education. Yeah, so thank you for that. So yeah, a lot of things happening. But I also attended my last ISBA board meeting last week. So
You probably wouldn't be able to do
yeah,
that.
because they'll be assigning somebody will be elected to take my role. It's probably a gentleman over at Huntington North in the Huntington school system. In fact,
We appreciate
likely. So it's
all
been
that
fun.
you've done for them.
It's been a fun
You're
run.
very informed and are committed to making sure our needs are communicated.
Thank you.
Board member and/or public comment.
I thought I'd tell you the county commissioners and county council met today, and they both approved their proposal to bring the DARE program back to life. So they got that passed, so that's a good thing.
So I guess I can talk a little more about that. It's still in planning stages, but every, I think, county in the state pretty much received settlement money from the opioid settlement class action lawsuit. And so I was part of that committee, and they, from the monies they received, part of the monies they had put forth as a grant to help with education for prevention of substance abuse, helping recovery homes, transition homes, things like that. So we did, in working with some folks, put together, Tiffany and I, a request to try to start a DARE program again. That curriculum has been revamped there for a while. It had kind of been proven to be maybe not as effective, but it is now considered evidence-based. So we did write a grant, and they did approve it just last week. We're still in discussion stages right now about how that will be staffed. Right now, the next training's not till June, so we've got some, it wouldn't be till next fall that we would be starting, but there is a curriculum, an in-depth curriculum 3 to 8, and then some exposure curriculum for just basically safety for K to 2, and anti-vaping, anti-prescription drugs and fentanyl specialties for 7 and 8. We also wrote another grant, Tiffany did, I'm not saying we did, Tiffany did, where, what was the organization?
SAG.
SAG.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, it wasn't through the same money, was it?
It was still through Drug-Free Adams County, but it was another pool of funds.
And they are sponsoring a stipend to bring a SAG chapter back to the elementary and middle school. So, pardon?
Middle and high school.
I'm sorry, middle and high school. I thought that's what I said, but I didn't. Middle and high school. And so we are looking for a staff member willing to sponsor those two organizations and do some special programming. And just so you know, it's now SAD, it's still SAD, but now it's Students Against Destructive Decisions. Used to be students, we all fought against drunk driving, but they broadened the.
So with those being grant-based or grant-funded, obviously there's an opportunity for that to waver to the wayside, and then we lose yet another program that's been built up and very needed. Can we kind of look at a plan B as we form this? Because it's definitely warranted information, whether we have the money or not, if we can incorporate it somehow. Those the monies.
Some of we can incorporate that with our federal funds, especially Title IV, and making sure we're providing a well-rounded educational.
I mean, the problem's not going away.
Agreed, it's not.
And that's why we have been talking with this group sometime, because again, there's judges, DCS, county council, lots of folks representing different entities on this committee, and they asked, so where do we need to start? And I said, 3rd or 4th grade, at least.
I would even say, I mean, obviously it's a touchy subject, but even our younger generation, because it's not just the students themselves, it's the people that they interact with, and how can they best be equipped, mindfully and physically.
Yes. Basically, how to keep yourself safe. And I think a lot of this curriculum focuses on healthy ways to say no and empowering students to feel like they can say no, even if maybe they're not in an environment where others are saying no. And that's important too, because it's hard when the folks you love might be struggling with some of those things too, and not telling you shouldn't love them. You should love your family. You should love whomever we might be talking about, but that doesn't mean you have to say everything that happens is okay. So anyway, that'll be more discussion coming. We're very early days, but that is an area we've been wanting to work on, because we are seeing the issue grow throughout the nation, that our community as well, we're not isolated. And just today I did receive, because we were the only school that put forth a request for this, and again, the biggest expense is getting an officer trained, because it is a 2-week commitment and ending for them to go through a very intense training. And so Decatur PD has some interest in it, but the Sheriff's Department just sent out a request for all 3 schools to meet and see what we can do to potentially get something going countywide, which I said I would be happy to help facilitate if they would give us that money. So we're going to see what we could do to maybe have something that could be used to do that, but I think that, when Dale was here, they said that even, no matter what, I think our kids need the education, they need the information, and we just have to keep enforcing the social emotional relationships to give them the strength to avoid and have other things to do, and encouraging them to be in positive structured situations.
Thank you.
What I'd add, Lenny Corral, the new guy on the county council, was a dare officer when he was a city cop in Decatur. He was a dare guy back in the 90s.
That's right. Forget about that.
It was his first meeting today. Was it? Yeah.
All right.
He was sober too. I'm just joking.
Okay, on that note, you might want to scratch that from public comment anyway. Any additional comments? Except for Eric? All right, with that, we'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you for coming.